Under the wide-open belly of a western dusk, the train moaned as if it carried the ghosts of everyone who had ever left someone behind. Heat rose from the tracks, softening the edges of the world until everything looked half-remembered. Beside a crate of wilted wildflowers stood Alara Rose, aged 20, an Apache orphan whose bare feet knew the taste of every stone in that station yard. The flowers in her hands trembled though there was no wind. She was speaking softly to them, promising they would find a good home tonight, though she could not promise the same for herself. The smell of iron and sage filled the air, and she looked toward the platform as the train exhaled a last tired hiss, as if whispering her name. Something in her gaze said she had been waiting for someone whose face she could not imagine. From the third car stepped Wyatt Cade, age 30, tall and road-worn, carrying nothing but a duffel and a kind of sorrow that could not be carried by any man for long. His boots sounded hollow on the plank. He was a cowboy without cattle, a drifter who had survived the war and found no peace in its end. The sun caught on the scar along his jaw, and for a heartbeat the light softened it into something noble. He smelled the air, dry, metallic, and thought maybe this was a place where a man could start over. Then he saw her, the girl with the flowers, and felt the strange pull of memory for a life he never lived. He slowed. Her eyes lifted. For one fragile instant, neither belonged to the world around them. Alara stepped forward, offering him a small bouquet of marigolds gone pale at the edges. "For luck, mister," she said. Her voice was steady but quiet, as if she spoke across a great distance. Wyatt shook his head, reaching for his pocket and stopping halfway. He didn't want to insult her by paying out of pity. But she saw the hesitation and whispered, "Please don't leave me alone. I'll give you love you'll feel forever." The words startled him, half a plea, half a promise. Her eyes held no mischief, only raw honesty. The station light caught the curve of her cheek, the smudge of soot near her collarbone. Something old inside him, something that still believed in mercy, moved. He bought all the flowers, every last wilted stem. She gathered them in trembling hands and looked at him as if he had just named her human again. He asked her where she lived. She nodded toward the tracks, where a shack leaned into the wind, but her voice faltered. "Sometimes there," she said, "sometimes nowhere." He could not walk away after that. So he offered her his arm. The train groaned behind them as if mourning its passengers, and together they crossed the dry road toward the canyon, shadows stretching long and uncertain. He told himself it was only for a night, a bit of kindness. Yet some part of him already feared the morning. Wyatt's ranch lay half a day's ride from town, a lonely sprawl of weathered boards and restless horses. He had built it with his own hands after the war, hoping to fill silence with labor. But silence had filled him instead. Alara moved through the house like a ghost at first, touching the worn furniture with careful reverence, setting the flowers she had saved into an old whiskey bottle on the windowsill. She cooked for him that night, corn cakes and beans that tasted of smoke and patience. When he thanked her, she smiled faintly, as if unsure how gratitude was meant to sound. He noticed her hands, small, scarred from work. She noticed his eyes, gray as the sky before rain. Between them stretched a quiet that didn't wound. Days passed like slow music. Alara sang to the horses in Apache under her breath. Wyatt mended a fence while watching her from the corner of his eye, wondering why peace always came dressed in such delicate things. When a storm rose from the south one evening, thunder rolling over the hills, he found her standing by the window, her shawl drawn tight. Lightning painted her face silver. She whispered something, perhaps a prayer, perhaps a memory, and when he stepped beside her, she didn't flinch. Their hands brushed, and for a long time neither moved. The storm howled, the old house shuddered, and they stood together, strangers bound by the same trembling world. The town noticed before they did. Whispers rode the wind faster than dust. An Apache girl at the Cowboy's ranch, a war veteran living in sin. When Wyatt rode into town for supplies, the blacksmith looked through him like glass. When Alara followed days later to sell her flowers, women crossed the street. Martha Lee, the innkeeper's wife, slipped her a loaf of bread and murmured, "Hold your head high, child. Wind don't break what can bend." But the words didn't keep her from crying that night. Wyatt heard and said nothing. Instead, he left a cup of tea outside her door before dawn. She found it still warm and smiled, though her eyes were red. By midsummer, the tension thickened. Sheriff Nolan Briggs stopped by one afternoon, his badge gleaming like a blade. "You're bringing shame to the town, Cade," he said. "A man like you ought to know better." Wyatt stood on the porch, jaw tight. "If knowing better means turning her out, then I'll stay ignorant." The sheriff tipped his hat and rode off, dust trailing behind him like judgment itself. That night, Wyatt sat outside staring at the stars until Alara joined him, bare feet whispering over the boards. "They hate what they don't understand," she said softly. He nodded, unable to speak. She took his hand, guiding it to her heart. It beat quick, defiant. "Then let them learn," she whispered. A week later, he saddled the horses at dawn. "We're going to the preacher," he said simply. She blinked in surprise, then smiled, slow, radiant, unbelieving. The ride was long and quiet, the desert blooming with purple cactus flowers after a rare rain. When they reached the small cedar chapel, morning light spilled through cracks in the walls. The preacher hesitated when he saw her, eyes flicking to her dark hair, her brown skin. But Alara stepped forward, laid a single white bloom on the altar, and said, "Let love be my name." The preacher's shoulders softened. He married them with no choir, no witnesses but Martha and the sun climbing over the hills. Wyatt's voice trembled as he vowed, "You gave me back the courage to be kind." When he lifted her veil, the same shawl she had worn since the station, he kissed her as though sealing a wound closed. Outside, the wind smelled of rain and forgiveness. For a while, peace returned. They planted more flowers around the porch. Wild marigolds, desert lilies, whatever seeds Alara found on her walks. Wyatt learned to laugh again, though the sound startled him each time. In the evenings they sat by the fire, trading stories in half-sentences. She told him of her mother's songs, of sleeping beneath mesquite trees. He told her of soldiers who never came home. Each word built a bridge over old sorrow. And when silence came, it was gentle. But in quiet towns, peace is just another rumor waiting to be broken. Autumn arrived with bitterness. The drought hardened the earth, and anger in men's hearts followed suit. One night, lights flickered on the horizon, torches. Voices carried through the cold air, accusations, slurs, fear dressed as righteousness. Wyatt rose from his chair, hand trembling toward the rifle. Alara touched his shoulder. "No," she said, stepping past him. Outside, the mob gathered, faces half-hidden, eyes burning. Sheriff Briggs stood at their front. "We won't have her kind here," someone shouted. Alara walked to the edge of the porch, bare feet silent on the wood. In her hand she held a single flower, its petals shaking in the wind. She placed it on the ground between them. "If love offends you," she said, "then hate shall be your cross to bear." Her voice was clear, steady as moonlight. Something in that quiet undid them. The torches wavered. Briggs looked down, shame flickering across his face like the dying light. One by one, the men lowered their flames. No one spoke. The mob dissolved into the night, swallowed by the wind. Wyatt stepped forward, pulling her into his arms. The smell of smoke lingered, but the danger was gone. Above them, dawn cracked open the horizon, pale and trembling. The world, for once, felt clean. Years rolled on, smooth as river stones. The ranch grew wild with color. Marigolds, sage, sunflowers, a small miracle in the desert. Wyatt built a swing beneath the cottonwood tree for their child, a boy with his mother's eyes and his father's quiet strength. Alara taught him songs that sounded like prayer even when they weren't. Sometimes travelers stopped by the gate and stared, surprised to see beauty where they expected only dust. Wyatt would smile, tip his hat, and say, "Ain't much, but it's home." On cool evenings, when the light slanted gold, he would sit on the porch and watch Alara weave flower crowns for their boy. Her hair glimmered with threads of silver now, but her smile was the same one that had stopped him on that long-ago station platform. He thought about her words, the ones that began everything. "Please don't leave me alone. I'll give you love you'll feel forever." He realized she had kept that promise every single day. And when night came, the desert hummed softly, a low eternal sound like the earth remembering. Wyatt leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking beneath him, and looked toward the stars. He imagined the younger man stepping off the train, lost and empty, not yet knowing the shape of his salvation. He wanted to tell that man, "Stay. Listen. Love doesn't always arrive dressed in perfection. Sometimes it comes barefoot, carrying wilted flowers, asking for shelter." He turned his gaze toward Alara, who was humming by the doorway, her voice winding through the dark like smoke. The air smelled of marigolds and rain. Somewhere a coyote called. Wyatt smiled, feeling time loosen its hold. "If you ever find a heart that stands beside you in your storms," he murmured, as if speaking to whoever might one day listen, "don't let the world shame your shelter." The wind stirred, carrying his words into the open night. And for the briefest moment, it seemed the stars themselves bowed lower, as if to bless the place where love had chosen to stay.